Welcome to today's Mishna Berurah class. Today's class, we're going to continue some more of the laws involving who is fit to lead davening, lead services. It's called Lered Lifnei HaTeva, and it's referring to someone who's going to lead from. We can now call it the Amud. The Teva was referring to the table upon which most of the readings and things occurred, and the design of the synagogue has changed a little bit, but essentially the services are the same. The words are just a little bit different than what we use colloquially. So we now refer to the place where the leader, the person leading services, the leader of the congregation, stands as the Amud, and we refer to the place where we read the Torah as the Bima, and we sometimes refer, and when we refer to the place where the Sefer Torah resides as the Aron, but at some point it was referred to as the Teva, the box, or it was also referred to as an ark or container, as we find that that's what Noach used to transport a whole bunch of animals, But the main thing is, I just wanted to kind of point out that if you're following along in the Hebrew, wondering why the words are slightly different, it's because the usages and some of the designs have changed ever so slightly. So the first law over here is that after we finish Psukei Zimra, which we finished in our previous sections, we're now going to recite Yishtabach. And that's when the Shaliach Tzibur, the leader of the congregation, should recite it. And he'll recite it while standing in front of the congregation. So the reason why the Shaliach Tzibur is called up at that point, the Mishna explains, is to make sure that you don't have a break between completing Psukei Zimra and when you get up there. So it sounded like we had said previously that if you are praying by yourself, you would also have to stand for Yishtabach. But it sounds like you may only have to do standing for Yishtabach. If you look in the Siddur, it says to stand for Yishtabach, but it may only have to stand for it if you're actually in the congregation and it gets you ready to recite the Kaddish afterwards. And so some people say that it's just a custom to stand when you're praying by yourself, and others say it's the actual law to do it. And the Vilna Gaon is the one who says that. So, but they say, well, everyone should always stand for it, even by yourself. And that seems to be the statement, but you don't have to do that. The other thing is that there's a custom to recite the 15 praises in Yishtabach, all in one breath. But a lot of poskim write afterwards that you don't have to do that. But the common custom, as listed in the Siddur, is to do that. So if you can just take a deep breath and then say it, it's a nice thing. Okay, that's the first halacha in today's Siman. So you only say Yishtabach if you recited Baruch Shamar and Psukei Zimra. So we talked about this last week's class, that Psukei Zimra, it starts with Baruch Shamar, is one long bracha, and taking breaks in the middle of it is like taking breaks in the middle of the blessings of Shema. You shouldn't do that. But it's also telling you that, as we've discussed in other classes that I've given, it's a bracha arucha. So it's a long bracha beginning with Baruch Shamar and ending with Yishtabach. So that's why Yishtabach doesn't open with a language of bracha, because it's part of the longer bracha starting with Baruch Shamar. And you should not recite it without it. And when we're running short on time, we discussed last week's class to say just Ashrei or Ashrei, a few other kapitlach of Tehillim, and maybe just add a few things here and there. So that is the way to do it. Let's see. Now let's move on to Halacha Gimel. The halacha over here is one should not recite the blessing on tzitzis in the middle of Psukei Zimra and Yishtabach. Okay, meaning that you shouldn't say it then. You should stop with Yishtabach and then put on your talis and tefillin. And and not even in between the different chapters of Tehillim, for example, because as we learned, it's one long bracha, so it's not appropriate to take the break there. So either you should put it on before Pesukei Zimra or after Yishtabach. And we learned another place that for tefillin, without having them on, you could actually put tefillin on at that point. But for the talis, we say that you should wait until it's in between the Yishtabach and the brachos of Kriyas Shema. And the Shliach Tzibur, the person leading, if he doesn't have a talis, because as we learned previously, not all adult young men were wearing talisim. Some did not wear them; they only wore a talis katan. So maybe this is a young man who didn't have one. He should put on a talis before reciting Yishtabach, so that way you don't take a break between that and Yishtabach. Okay, and then that's so we learned before that there were different rules about when you would say the bracha on that. So if you're using a communal one and you have intent just to borrow it, you don't have to make a bracha, and that way you're not taking a break in between. Okay, and if you don't have tefillin on, because let's say it was too early, you were reciting Pesukei Zimra, you can put on your tefillin at the same time and make the bracha. And we could also say that you should wait until after Yishtabach. And the reason why the person wears a talis is because it would not be appropriate to keep the tzibur waiting while they put their talis on. So if they had one that they could put on, they should make the bracha. And so too, if they didn't have tefillin on, they should put them on now too, and then lead the davening. So if they waited, however, until the end of Yishtabach to ask them to daven, and they haven't recited the Kaddish yet, he can go ahead and put on the tzitzis and even tefillin at this point. And the Kehillah should wait, but that's not appropriate to do. And let's see, anything else? And okay, now let's say you finished the bracha of Yishtabach and you didn't have a minyan yet. If after you finish Yishtabach and somebody else, the 10th guy, walks in, so you can now say 3 psukim from Pesukei Zimra, and then you can recite the Kaddish after that. Because you shouldn't recite Kaddish without there being some psukim on one side of it. And that's the halacha for that. So if a minyan comes late, that is your b'diavad, that is your ex post facto situation to resolve that. So let's talk about when the Shliach Tzibur starts. Let's talk about the qualifications for the Shliach Tzibur. So Shliach Tzibur should be someone who is appropriate. The word here is hagun, okay? And so who is hagun? Who is appropriate? Who is a fit leader for the congregation? He has to be empty of sin, okay? And he cannot have a bad reputation, even in his youth. And he has to be humble and well received by the community. And they also have a very pleasant chant and voice, so they can sing well and recite well. I wish I would apply to these rules equally. And also, when he recites, that always is pleasant, but it's also very sweet. And someone who is normally accustomed to reciting Torah, Nevi'im, and Ksuvim from reciting from all parts of Tanakh. And why do we say that? So a lot of people explain how bad it is to have a bad leader for the congregation, and the appropriateness is discussed at length in other svarim, and it would be we can talk about it at some other point, but this just has to be someone who is an appropriate leader. They also have to make sure that their garments are long, and they should go down below. This is what the Mishna brings down. They should go down below their legs, and they have to be the first person to come into shul and the last person to leave. And the Mishna explains that he shouldn't be stupid, and he shouldn't be a fool. He should be able to intelligently discuss everything that go on in the community. And you should find the Shliach Tzibur who is actually a tzaddik ben tzaddik, he says, who is a righteous person, the son of a righteous person. because the prayer of a righteous person, son of a righteous person, who is praying is infinitely better than the son of a righteous person, son of a bad person, of Russia. And some people write that this isn't necessarily true. It doesn't matter who your parents are. It depends on who you are. If he's from some type of family that is of ill repute, and you have a righteous person who's of a very fine family, so you should prefer one to the other, is what they basically say. And he also says, and he asks the question, what about if they have any physical deformities? So by Kohanim can't have physical deformities when they serve in the temple. Those laws don't apply to the Shaliach Tzibur. So the most important thing the Mishnah Berurah explains is that they should have a heart that is broken and humble before God, and they should not be embarrassed to recite the prayers. And some people are even strict to have all of these things before they even let anybody lead davening at all. Okay, so there's a lot of different things that we refer to as violating averos as well. So they say, well, what about a person, there's a suspicion. The suspicion count to not let them lead from the congregation. And they say, well, even a suspicion, even when there's no actual testimony, would result in them not being permitted to serve as a Shaliach Tzibur as well, because we're trying to be careful about that. And another thing that we're worried about is that even if a person has only done sins occasionally and they're not a full-fledged sinner, that's also a good reason to not let them do it until they do tshuva and accept upon themselves not to do those sins again. Now a person, if they, let's say, they're just talking about an appointment for a full-time position. Your job is to lead the congregation as a professional chazan, okay, as a professional shliach tzibur. So we don't have any reason to go ahead and remove a professional from their job just because you've heard they did it in Avera one time. However, if you do find that people are complaining about him, there might be a reason to remove him. But this is actually a very difficult subject because you're talking about somebody's job. So it's a very, very complicated subject. But basically what they're trying to say is if you hire a professional for this job, then they need to have all of these qualifications. And usually we only use these qualifications for Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. Interesting thing Mishna Berurah mentions over here. Let's say that this leader of the Knesset, the Chazan, if he has a fight between himself and other members of the synagogue, and some people stop coming to shul, or some people are saying things, they did something to each other, and whether it was public or private, and he's still picking fights with other people in congregation, or people even outside the congregation, but it involves somebody in the congregation. And he says that these things are all reasons to not have somebody to be a Shaliach Tzibur. It should be a quiet and painless and easy experience. And that would be the most important thing to do. Okay, so now, however, there are people out there who are just annoying, so you have to use a little seichel with this as well. But the main thing is to focus on if there's a real reason to be concerned that the congregation won't come to shul as a result of this person leading the prayer service. And so other important things are that, for example, Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, that they should have to be married and at least 30 years old. But for the rest of the year, that doesn't seem to be a problem even if they're not married, as long as they have a beard. So there's all these little cute little laws over here and customs about being a Shaliach Tzibur. The next halacha is, if you can't find somebody with all these qualifications, then just take the next best person who's kind of a nice guy and is kind of smart. And then the Ramah adds, if he's kind of an ignoramus a little bit, but he's attains some age and is pleasant to listen to, and people like him, so that's fine too. A 13-year-old who knows what they're saying but doesn't sound so good, and that person is going to be preferable to somebody who is older and who is an Am Haaretz. Okay, someone who is an ignoramus. So we already said that a person who has violated any Torah laws shouldn't be a shliach tzibur. However, if they did it by accident, so if they accidentally killed somebody, right? They were chopping wood and the axe head flies off and chas v'shalom strikes somebody and kills them. So that person can come back and be leading the shliach tzibur. But if they did it intentionally, they should never be a shliach tzibur, because they will never ever recover from this bad repute. Okay. So there's no way for repentance to undo that. Okay. So now anybody who is at least 13 can be the shliach tzibur, and even in this case, as we're talking about sort of a permanent position, this 13-year-old could go ahead and take that position over somebody who's many years older but is ignorant. Okay, so the idea is that a person has to have a nice reputation, and as long as they don't have anything, the problem is to have bad or demerits against them. So as long as they have done some mistakes in life, but they appear to be relatively religious on the surface, blah blah blah, those are all good things. Okay, so not only was it killing somebody, but any type of sin that was done publicly, as long as they don't have a bad reputation accompanying them. And that's what the Ramah brings down. Now the Magen Avraham, which is brought down here in the Mishna Berurah, says that a number of people say that as long as you have done teshuvah, that should be fine, even to be a permanently paid shliach tzibur. So the only problem is they were more stringent for a tainus tzibur, that when you're doing a public fast, that was more stringent, even to keep them away. And the Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur. But if you wanted the job any other day of the week, you could do it, as long as you've done teshuvah for what you did wrong. And the Pri Megadim follows up with this by saying that that's okay, and then some people say that even would work even for Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, but we feel that it's important to be strict, especially on the fast days. So we find that if there's really nobody else, it should be fine. And if you hired them already, then you shouldn't remove them. So that's an interesting point about who you're looking for in a shliach tzibur, in someone to lead the congregation. So we say another qualification for the shliach tzibur is we're going to only appoint people who have a full beard. Why? Because that is considered honoring the congregation. That's kavod tzibur. But if it's just something that comes up every so often, a person will lead the congregation every so often, even if they don't have a full beard, that's okay. Shliach tzibur. Yes, you have spelled that correctly. And so if they just are doing every once in a while they're going to be leading the congregation, then they could go ahead and lead as long as it's not a regular paid position. Or if it's because there are certain times when the permanent guy needs a little bit of a break, you can have somebody who doesn't have a full beard go ahead and lead the services. What does this mean? Every so often, as long as it's not the high holidays, right? That's and not on the public fast days. Okay, so if they need them to do it, that's okay. And as long as they are 13 years old and they look like they have obtained puberty. But we have to know kind of when they're going to be reciting it. So as long as they are not the permanent one, and they're just helping out the main chazan, the main leader, that would be okay. There's a question of what's considered an established position or a non-established position if you split it up amongst people, but if it's always during certain times and this person is always showing up and they don't really have a full beard and not so old, you shouldn't use them. Let's do one more halacha over here and then we'll pick this up next time. Let's say you're in a situation where nobody knows how to be a shliach tzibur. And there's only a kid who's 13 years old and one day, right? 13 years and one day. So it's preferable that he will lead the congregation than to not have a minyan at all. So even though everybody else there is a little bit older and so on, there's nothing wrong with letting a 13-year-old do it as long as trying to actually host the minyan. And let's look at time for one more over here. Halacha number 8 now, so we can get one more in. Okay, so someone who doesn't have a beard, so as long as we know that he's allowed to, as long as we know he could have been old enough to have had a beard, so that's fine, as long as he could potentially have a beard. So you don't have to have a beard, but you have to be old enough to at least have a full beard on your face. So there's no requirement to have a beard is what he's saying. Which is to say that let's say someone's about 20 years old, even though they don't have a beard, since they could have a full beard, they could accept the position of shliach tzibur. And especially if they're younger and they have a full beard, they can win the job as well, as long as they're about 18 or so. So there's a big preference for beards in leading the congregation. So that is an important halacha to know that beards make all the difference for leading the tzibur. Not as much as the other things we mentioned previously, but we used to have a saying over here in Washington. There were certain baseball player, they used to say, "Fear the beard," because you'd see them come up. It was awe-inspiring. And that's part of the dignity owed to the congregation, is they're all inspired by the person who has that full beard as opposed to somebody who does not. Somehow it's more awe-inspiring. We will pick up with Siman 53 next week. I have to cut class short a little bit today, unfortunately. My duties are calling, but I'm glad we were able to have a little bit of time together. And we will see everyone for our next class on Avos Chesed on Thursday, B'ez Hashem. Everyone should have a great day.